You know how sometimes people come over, see something you built, and say, "Wow, can I pay you to make one for me?" Well, that's exactly what happened. I make furniture as a hobby, mostly for myself. But a friend saw my corner shelves and said, "You have to make me a set. I'll pay you $300. They needed custom shelves that don't exist in stores, I said. Sure, why not? I like sawdust. First things first, I headed out to the lumber yard to pick up materials. I needed boards wide enough to fill a corner space that you just can't buy off the shelf. After poking around for a while and dodging the expensive stuff, I found 3 solid boards with a nice grain. Grabbed some glue, wood filler, and a few other basics while I was at it. All in all, I spent just under 50, maybe a little more once you factor in the little things that always sneak onto the receipt. Not bad for a custom job. And with materials in hand, it was official. This hobby project just became a commission. With the boards in hand and measurements ready, I brought everything into my small workshop, just enough space for me, the wood, the saw, and a healthy dose of optimism. Before cutting, I double-checked all the dimensions. Then I checked them again. And then one more time, just to be safe. Because once you cut, there's no going back, and I didn't buy any backup boards. Marking the cuts, lining up the saw, adjusting for the blade width, it took me about 30 minutes to get through all the pieces. But when I finally started cutting, it was surprisingly satisfying. Everything came out square and clean, which is always a good feeling when you're just one bad angle away from starting over. I always start with the corner joints first. Why? Because once those 90-degree angles are locked in, everything else just falls into place. Plus, they're way easier to sand and align when they're built right from the beginning. For this part, I used my trusty biscuit joiner. It slices little pockets into the wood, where I slip in these oval-shaped biscuits kind of like wooden puzzle pieces. A bit of glue, pop in the biscuits, clamp it tight, and just like that, you've got a rock-solid right angle. It's one of those tools that makes you feel like a pro, even if you're just doing this in your garage. Once the corner pieces were perfectly lined up, it was time to glue everything together. I grabbed the wood glue, filled each biscuit slot, slid the pieces into place, and clamped them down with just enough pressure to keep everything square. Getting those 90-degree angles right, that's the key to the whole build. If the corners are off, the whole shelf starts looking like modern art, and not in a good way. This step took me about an hour, between checking the fit 5 times, adjusting the clamps, wiping off the glue squeeze out, and staring at it like a proud parent. I didn't want anything shifting while I wasn't looking. Once it was clamped and aligned, I filled in any small gaps with wood filler. Not because I made mistakes, okay, maybe a couple, but because even the best joints appreciate a little polish. Then I left it all to dry overnight, because, let's face it, glue works on its own schedule. You can rush a haircut, but not a glue up. The next morning everything was dry and ready for sanding. So I geared up, dust mask on, safety glasses in place because nothing says good morning like a face full of sawdust. I grabbed my orbital sander, plugged it in, and started working my way across every surface. It took me about 30 minutes to get everything smooth. Edges, corners, the biscuit joints, all of it. I like to think of sanding as the quiet therapy part of woodworking, except it's loud and covered in dust. Pro tip, sanding may not be glamorous, but skip it, and your shelves will feel like you carved them out with a rock. With the base nice and solid, it was time to add the side walls. I took my time on this step, about an hour total, because this is where things really start to look like shelves. I measured everything carefully with a speed square and a ruler to make sure the angles stayed true. No leaning, no guessing, just crisp 90-degree corners all around. Then came the glue. I applied a thin, even bead along the edges, pressed the side walls in place, and tacked them down with some tiny brad nails. Every piece went in with care. I'd rather spend extra time measuring than spend double the time fixing a crooked shelf later. Once it was all together, I hit the seams with more wood filler to clean up any tiny gaps. And of course, I let it dry overnight. Again. Because woodworking is mostly just making something and then waiting for it to dry. The next day, guess what? Yep, more sanding. This round was all about prep for the stain, so it had to be really smooth. No bumps, no mist filler, no rough patches. I suited up again, dust mask on, safety glasses back in place. Honestly, by this point I should have just worn a full spacesuit. I grabbed the orbital sander again and went over every inch of the shelves, checking with my hand to feel for any hidden rough spots. It took me about 30 minutes to finish everything. And sure, my arm felt like I'd been wrestling a washing machine, but the wood, smooth as glass. Sanding might be the gym workout of woodworking. You hate it while you're doing it, but man, it makes a difference in the end. They wanted black shelves, clean, dark, and modern. I asked around and everyone pointed me to ebony stain. Rich color, nice grain contrast, perfect. Before staining, I wiped down every surface to get rid of the sanding dust. That part's important. Dust and stain do not mix well. Now, some folks use brushes or sponges to apply stain, but me? I like using a cloth. There's something really satisfying about rubbing the stain into the wood by hand. You get more control, fewer streaks, and honestly, it just feels right. I worked slowly and evenly, making sure to hit every edge and corner. It took me about 30 minutes to stain all 3 shelves. After the first coat dried, I checked it under the light and spotted a couple of small imperfections. Filled those in, gave them a quick sanding, and went in with a second coat. This time it looked perfect. Deep black, smooth surface, and the wood grain still showing through just a bit. Just how I like it. After the stain fully dried, it was time to protect the finish. You don't want to skip this part, especially if the shelves are going to hold things like flower pots, books, or coffee mugs. A good top coat keeps the surface durable, easy to wipe clean, and helps the stain last for years. I decided to go with a spray polyurethane. It's quicker, gives a smooth coat, and doesn't leave brush marks if you're careful. Before spraying, I gave the shelves one last dusting and set them up in a well-ventilated area because, let's be honest, polyurethane fumes are no joke. I applied light, even coats from about 10-12 inches away, sweeping across the surface without stopping in one spot too long. 2 coats was enough to give it that nice satin finish, just a bit of sheen, not too glossy. Once everything was dry and cured, I attached the wall mounts on the back of each shelf. At that point, they were fully ready to hang. Sturdy, finished, and looking like something you'd see in a boutique furniture store. Finally, the shelves were done. Smooth, stained, sealed, and looking better than I expected. I packed them up carefully and delivered them to the client myself. We mounted them on the wall together, and they fit the space perfectly. One shelf now holds a little row of books, another's home to a few plants, and the third, it's just there, being pretty, silently saying, "Yeah, I'm custom." The client was thrilled. I was exhausted, but in that good, satisfied way. My hands were sore, my shop was a mess, but my mood, top shelf. So in the end, I earned $300 for the job. After subtracting materials and supplies, I cleared around $230. Not bad for 3 days of casual work, and let's be honest, I would have built them anyway, just for fun. That's the beauty of turning a hobby into something useful. It starts with a few boards and a random request, and next thing you know, you're making something that lives in someone else's home. Thanks for watching. If you've got a little time, a few tools, and some patience, don't be afraid to try. You don't need a workshop full of machines. You just need to say, "Yeah, I can build that."